The Bible, God's good book. God's first book and his book of books seriously cuts through the inflation of human nonsense every time. In Genesis chapter 27, the whole way through the chapter 28, God's family feud blows out. Big question, what's God going to do about it? Come on in, let's check it out. I can tell most people don't read their Bibles for one reason. Everybody's blaming everybody else for all their problems. We've got 99 problems and we ain't one of them. You see, the Bible sees it all differently. We've got 99 problems and we are every one of them. The obstacle or the obstacle of God's people is not the outsiders, but it's ourselves. That's how the Bible teaches us. That's how God cuts through the inflation of human nonsense. God's Bible has no time for blaming others. It's a Cain kills Abel kind of world, and we need to deal with it. And what we need to deal with it is by having trust and faith in God to get us through. We need God to get us through. He will be with us. That is the main point, loud and clear. He will see his promise through to the end. And that is where our objective attention should happen. He's going to get us up his ladder because the keys to the kingdom just simply can't be bought. Anyhow, we're going to jump into our text. But before we do, let's pray the way the Lord Jesus taught us how to pray. Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our debts as we forgive those who have debts against us, and our trespasses and our sins, and those who have trespasses and sins against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Let's read with our sense of humor. Amen. Right on. Well, I do think a sense of humor is necessary for all good Bible reading because God himself has a great sense of humor. But let's just dive in. We're going to read and talk, because it is a longer passage, but, it's a good story. And we need good stories. We need everything that the Bible has to give to us so that we can wake up every day and get through this insanity of inflation of human nonsense that we all live in. So anyhow, it goes, we begin like this in actually the very end of chapter 26, verse 34. When Esau was 40 years old, he took Judith, the daughter of Beeri the Hittite, to be his wife, and Basemath, the daughter of Elon the Hittite, and they made life bitter for Isaac and Rebekah. Well, it's the same old Esau. He's still daft. He's still dim-witted. He is still shrugging off God's words of promise that were given to Abe, that Isaac, knows that, everybody knows it. Esau knows it, but he just shrugs them off. It just doesn't matter to him. And so, Hittites, come on, Esau, are you kidding me, man? Going and marrying Hittite women? Well, see, that's just part of Esau's personality. He shrugs off, that the efforts that Abraham had made to, get Isaac, a wife from outside of the land. He knows all of this. He knows better, but he doesn't do better. And when it comes to Isaac, honestly, he offers no help. He wasn't a planner like Abraham was a planner. Abraham planned that whole thing out, and Isaac trusted his dad. Isaac has dropped the ball when it comes to being a dad. Anyhow, let's not get too deep into this. It's just the same old Esau who lives by taste and lives by sight. And so he just grabs whatever is close, and a couple Hittite women will do. And that's a problem too, because he takes two, which is not good. It's not completely evil because the Bible does not absolutely condemn polygamy, but it's never a good picture once polygamy enters the scene. There's no such thing as successful polygamy when it comes to the Bible. Even though we don't find God putting a condemnation on it, it's still never good. And I think logic tells us, man, most men don't do well with one wife, let alone the thought that they could do well with two. Anyhow, another topic for another day, I suppose. But, The passage is going to be pretty relatable to us because, well, the in-law jokes, seem to have no end. Whether you're a son-in-law or whether you have in-laws, I mean, listen, in-law jokes have no end, and the Hittite women have become terrible in-laws to the in-laws, and everybody sees them as outlaws. Well, anyhow, like I said, it's pretty relatable to us because, well, we still understand the complexities of bringing two families together with all their different, habits and all of that. But anyhow, Isaac blesses Jacob. So the story continues. When Isaac was old and his eyes were dim so that he could not see, he called Esau his older son and said to him, "My son." He answered to him, "Here I am." He said, "Behold, I'm old, and I am close to death. Take your weapons and your quiver and your bow and go out in the field and hunt for me some game. Prepare for me some delicious food as I love and bring it to me so that I may eat, that my soul may bless you before I die." Okay, so the scene starts with Isaac. He is now old, he is blind, and he is on death's door. And he is ready to transfer the big blessing over to who? Well, to Esau, because he never did buy it that God told his wife Rebekah that the older shall serve the younger, and Jacob was to receive the blessing. Isaac didn't buy it. Esau doesn't buy it, I suppose. And we see this kind of unholy alliance between Isaac and Esau all their lives, that they're the favorites to each other in the family. But now it's time to make this blessing go forward. And God said that it was going to be different than this. So what's going to happen? Well, this is what happens. The blessing is the object of the story. That one that Esau had sold previously, his birthright, to his younger brother, Jacob, for a bowl of soup. And that told us pretty clearly that Esau was, well, spiritually pretty dim-witted. And honestly, we see the lack of family going on in this plan. Isaac just goes out on his own and he grabs Esau. They're going to do their own thing. They don't care what anybody says. There's no family affair in this. And it's a long-standing disagreement between Isaac and Rebekah, as to who's supposed to get the blessing. And we see that Isaac and Esau, they're just going to go rogue. They're not consulting with Rebekah or Jacob. This should be like a family time that we all agree to in no way, shape, or form. Then the verses go on. Now Rebekah was listening when Isaac spoke to his son Esau. So when Esau went out to the field to hunt for game and bring it, Rebekah said to her son Jacob, "I heard your father speak to your brother Esau, bring me game and prepare for me delicious food that I may eat it and bless you before the Lord before I die. Now therefore, my son, obey my voice as I command you. Go to the flock, bring me 2 young goats that I may prepare delicious food from them for your father, such as he loves. And you shall bring it to your father and eat so that he may bless you before he dies." But Jacob said to Rebekah his mother, "Behold, my brother Esau is a hairy man and I'm a smooth man. Perhaps my father will feel me, and I shall seem to be mocking him and bring a curse upon myself and not a blessing." His mother said to him, "Let your curse be on me, my son. Only obey my voice and go, bring them to me." So he went and took them and brought them to his mother, and his mother prepared delicious food just as his father loved. That Rebekah took the best garments of her son Esau, which were in the house, and put them on Jacob, her younger son, and the skins of the young goats she put on his hands, on the smooth part of his neck, and she put the delicious food and bread which she had prepared into the hand of her son Jacob. Okay, now we see the other side of this unholy alliance. It's Rebekah and Jacob, and they are, in a constant family feud, it seems, with Isaac and Esau, particularly when it comes to this blessing, and we know that each one has their favorites. So what we have is a good old-fashioned family feud on, and it is really going to turn into a colossal family feud at this moment. So anyhow, I do believe that way too much credit is given to Jacob in this storyline. It's a very popular storyline that people talk a lot about, speak a lot about, etc. And I think that Jacob gets way too much credit for this plan because Rebekah says it's her plan, and Rebekah really does make Jacob go along with it, which he does, but this is Rebekah's plan. And that's what she says in verse 13. This is my plan, and if anybody's going to get a curse, let it fall on me. Remember those words because, well, she is a prophet. God does speak to her, but she also is a prophet when it comes to herself, and this thing is not going to go well for her. The bigger picture here, though, is that nobody's trusting in God. Nobody's trusting in God's sovereignty here. Isaac, he's guilty of pride, not consulting God, not believing that God's word could have come through. Rebekah, his wife, that's bad. And then Rebekah, she is guilty of relying on her deceptions and not believing in that God could somehow accomplish his will in some other way than her being so clever and backstabby in this big plan. Jacob and Esau are guilty too. They just follow along in the sins of their parents and they become, kind of the way that their parents are. So Jacob himself is clever and crafty and Esau himself is daft or dim-witted, a little bit like Isaac is, especially when it comes to this. Okay, the scene rolls forward. Let's move. So he went in to his father and he said, "My father." "Here I am." "Who are you, my son?" Jacob said to his father, "I am Esau, your firstborn. I have done as you have told me. Now sit up and eat of my game, that your soul may bless me." But Isaac said to his son, "How is it that you found it so quickly, my son?" He answered, "Because the Lord your God granted me success." Isaac said to Jacob, "Please come near me, that I may feel you, my son, to know whether you really are Esau, my son Esau, or not." Jacob went near to Isaac his father, who felt him, and said, "The voice is Jacob's voice, but the hands are Esau's hands." He didn't recognize him because his hands were hairy like his brother Esau's hands. So he blessed him. He said, "Are you really my son Esau?" Jacob answered, "I am." Then he said, "Bring it near to me that I may eat of my son's game and bless you." So he brought it near to him, and he ate, and he brought him wine, and he drank. Then his father Isaac said to him, "Come near, kiss me, my son." So he came near and kissed him, and Isaac smelled the smell of his garments and blessed him and said, "See, the smell of my son is as the smell of a field that the Lord has blessed. May God give you the dew of heaven and the fatness of the earth, plenty of grain and wine. Let peoples serve you, nations bow down to you. Be Lord over your brothers, and may your mother's sons bow down to you. Cursed be everyone who curses you, and blessed be everyone who blesses you." As soon as Isaac had finished blessing Jacob, when Jacob had scarcely gone out from the presence of Isaac his father, Esau came in from hunting. He also prepared delicious food, brought it to his father, and he said to his father, "Let my father arise and eat of his son's game, that you may bless me." His father Isaac said to him, "Who are you?" Esau answered, "I'm your son, your firstborn, Esau." Isaac trembled very violently, and he said, "Who was it then that hunted game and brought it to me, and I ate before you came, and I have blessed him? Yes, and he shall be blessed." Okay, end scene for a second. Let's catch up and talk about what's going on here. First of all, Jacob sounds nervous, and that makes sense because Jacob was nervous. Jacob really did doubt his mother's plan. He didn't know if this thing was going to work. He didn't really want to go through with it, but he does. And so he ends up sounding nervous. "Here I am. I am Esau, your firstborn. I have done as you told me. Now sit up and eat my game, that your soul may bless me, because the Lord your God granted me success." Compare that to the way Esau actually sounds, and he busts through the tent and he says, "Let my father arise and eat of his son's game, that you may bless me." So we can tell by just the writing that, Jacob is a nervous Mervis when it comes to this whole thing. Now, I do believe here that Isaac knows that he's being played because he clearly doubts that this really is Esau. That comes through loud and clear. And then Isaac very interestingly uses all of his senses, except for sight because he's blind, right? He uses all of his senses to try to work this out, but he also ignores the sense of hearing. So we get this, this inquisition that he deploys to work it all out, but he doesn't have sight and he doesn't really use his ears. He even says, "Boy, this sounds like Jacob's voice." But then he ignores that. Then he goes along with touching, and he goes along with smelling, and he goes along with tasting that delicious food. And, he just simply passes on the most important test, and that is the voice test. Get Jacob talking, and I'm quite sure it's going to be easy to catch, Jacob in this lie. And this becomes, part of Isaac's character. He not only can he not see, but he doesn't seem to be able to hear as well. He doesn't use his hearing. Anyhow, we have kind of a Rodney Dangerfield, like moment when the gig is up and Esau, the real Esau, comes through and comes in. Isaac trembles and he said, "Well, who was it then that was here?" I mean, come on, Isaac, are you kidding me? Who was it then who was here? I think that Isaac knows exactly what's going on, and somehow in the middle of it, maybe his conscience was, provoked. Maybe his conscience is finally catching up with him, his God conscience, and saying to himself, Jacob is here instead of Esau, and this is just like Rebecca always said, and maybe it's time for me to just go along with it. I think that Isaac, I think he's in the know. I think that all these questions and whatnot, in the middle of it all, he decides to kind of give up the game to his wife and go ahead with it all. And then when he finally does give the blessing, it's a little bit of weak cheese. He gives a general creation kind of blessing in the beginning. May God give you the dew of the heaven, the fatness of the earth. It's just kind of creation stuff. May God prosper you with just the stuff of the earth. But then when he says, "Let people serve you and nations bow down to you, and be the Lord over your brothers and your mother's sons, may they bow down to you." At this point, it really does seem like he is spouting the words that God gave Rebecca. And that's what also gives me a clue that he's very aware of the words that God gave Rebecca. And I think he knows the gig is up. And then, like I said, he's got this kind of Rodney Dangerfield, moment. "Oh, I think it's broken," whenever Esau does come in. I think it all sounds really, like Esau, or I'm sorry, Isaac is just, he realizes he's being played, and probably for the right reason. Maybe. Hard to work out. Doesn't say it exactly, but that's my suspicion. And then the text moves forward. "As soon as Esau heard these words of his father, he cried out with exceeding and great and bitter cry to his father. He said, 'Bless me, even me also, O my father.' But he said, 'Your brother came deceitfully, and he has taken away your blessing.' Esau said, 'Is he not guilty or rightly named Jacob? He's cheated me out of these 2 times. He took away my birthright, and behold, now he's taken away my blessing. Then, have you not reserved the blessing for me?' Isaac answered to Esau, he said, 'Behold, I have made him lord over you, and his brothers I have given to him for servants. With, grain and wine I have sustained him. What then can I do for you, my son?' Esau said to his father, 'Have you but one blessing, my father? Bless me, even me also, O my father.' And Esau lifted up his voice and wept. Then Isaac his father answered and said to him, 'Behold, away from the fatness of the earth shall your dwelling be, away from the dew of the heaven on high. By your sword you shall live, and you shall serve your brother. But when you grow restless, you shall break his yoke from your neck.'" Not a very good blessing. Anyhow, now Esau hated Jacob because of the blessing with which his father had blessed him. Esau said to himself, "The days of mourning for my father are approaching. Then I will kill my brother Jacob." But the words of Esau, her older son, were told to Rebekah. So she sent and called Jacob, her younger son, and said to him, "Behold, your brother Esau comforts himself about you by planning to kill you. Now therefore, my son, obey my voice. Arise, flee to Laban, my brother, in Haran, and stay with him a while until your brother's fury turns away, until your brother's anger turns away from you, and he forgets what you have done to him. Then I will send and bring you from there. Why should I be bereft of you both in one day?" Okay, this scene's interesting because there's a bit of arrested development that we see with Esau, meaning that all of a sudden Esau seems to care about his birthright and his blessing, which I think we are right to suspect that maybe he really doesn't care about the content of the blessing, Abraham's blessing, the words that God had shared with Abraham. And the affirmation of that blessing with Isaac. I don't think that Esau is focused on that. It seems like Esau is just focusing on outdoing his brother. And it sounds like the family feud is really the only thing that Esau is genuinely upset about. Maybe not. It is interesting, though, that there is a high degree of honesty with oaths and rights and blessings, and it's taken very seriously, even to the point where it seems like deception is no excuse to reverse the blessing. Or, because that doesn't seem super logical to me, or has Isaac's conscience finally been won over, and he knows that the words of his wife were correct, and now he just kind of plays it out for Esau. Well, if there was ever ground that was gained by Esau's, appreciation for the birthright and the blessing, it is completely lost whenever he plots to murder his brother. And nothing gets by Rebekah, man. This household is run by Rebekah. So two things, number one, it is, someone overheard Esau, saying that he's going to kill his brother. They went and told Rebekah. And then oddly enough, when Rebekah talks to Jacob, she says, oh, this is not good. She says, whenever he forgets what you have done to him. Remember when she said, I'll take the blame? Doesn't seem like Rebekah's willing to take the blame at this point. Well, anyhow, the family feud is now on. It is full-scale war between the warring parties. And Rebekah does seem like a prophet. We know she's a prophet because God actually gave her words. That makes her a prophet. But she actually not only sees God's future the way he told her about it, but she also sees her own future whenever she says, why should I be bereft of you both in one day? So it's kind of an eerie prediction. We're actually not going to hear anything really more of Rebekah. We don't even know when she dies, and we don't even know that she really did see Jacob. Jacob's going to be gone for 22 years. I don't think that's what she had in mind, and maybe she died. It's hard to work out exactly what happened to Rebekah, but we're not going to hear anything about Rebekah after this scene. And this is where the scene goes. Rebekah said to Isaac, I loathe my life because of the Hittite women. If Jacob marries one of the Hittite women like these, one of the women of the land, what good will my life be to me? Then Isaac called Jacob and blessed him and directed him, you must not take a wife from the Canaanite women. Arise, go to Paddan-aram to the Bethuel, to your mother's father, and take as your wife one of the daughters of Laban, your mother's brother. God Almighty bless you and make you fruitful and multiply, that you may become a company of peoples. May he give the blessing of Abraham to you and your offspring with you, that you may take possession of the land of your sojournings that God gave to Abraham. Thus Isaac sent Jacob away, and he went to the Paddan-aram to Laban, the son of Bethuel, the brother of Rebekah, Jacob's and Esau's mother. Esau saw that Isaac had blessed Jacob and sent him away to Paddan-aram to take a wife from there, and that as he blessed him, he directed him, you must not take a wife from the Canaanite women, and that Jacob had obeyed his father and his mother and gone to Paddan-aram. So when Esau saw that the Canaanite women did not please Isaac his father, Esau went to Ishmael and took as his wife, besides the wives that he had, Mahalath, the daughter of Ishmael, Abraham's son, the sister of Nebaioth. Okay, so in this scene, Isaac and Rebekah still can't be honest with each other. So instead of just going to Isaac and saying, hey, listen, some mistakes have been made here, but now Esau wants to kill, Jacob. We need to do something about this. Instead, she just keeps going with the lie. She knows that the Hittite women have been a source of contention for both Isaac and her. And so she makes this her excuse for sending Jacob away, which Isaac seems to buy, which just reminds me that, everyone here is keeping Jacob's murder plot away from Isaac. And that is just the way family dysfunction goes. Avoid working on the hard truths together. Lie when the truth itself would work probably much better. And I see in this too a condition that we see all around us, and that is many fathers, just like Isaac, become spiritually daft. That and then the family kind of keeps them in that way. So we see plenty of fathers who become spiritually dense, and then the family itself tends to keep them in that status. They don't let them be part of the problem solving. They don't let them lead. And so the fault is lying onto everybody here. And that's the way it always goes. The fault is always lying on everybody here. And, what Isaac does for Jacob, by sending him away to get a wife, this is what Isaac should have done with Esau many years ago. He should have made plans and preparations like Abraham did to get his sons properly married, so that none of this, dysfunction would have happened to begin with. So Isaac, like many fathers, are just spiritually sloppy. They are believers, they can be believers, and they have great strengths, but they could also do much better. I think that is part of the lesson going on here for us all. Fathers need to do a great job in the house, and mothers need to do a great job in the house. And when fathers and mothers do a great job together in the house, the whole house comes together. But now, instead, we've got Jacob on the run. And then our last scene here with Esau gives us a picture of Esau that's actually not so bad. Esau's not a terrible man. He's just dense. He's just spiritually daft. He's unled. And so Esau, again, we're told he sees that Isaac blessed Jacob and sent him away. Instead of hearing, he sees it, and then he misses the mark. So what he thinks he sees, he decides, well, okay, I'll go get a different wife. And again, without being spiritually led by his father, like, he just saw Jacob, he goes off on his own again. And this time he goes to Ishmael's daughters, and he takes on one of their wives. And it's kind of like, come on, Esau. But you got to feel bad for Esau because, well, honestly, Isaac is not leading the family like Isaac knows how to lead the family. And Esau, in many ways, is just a victim of his, father's spiritual denseness. And of course, he's spiritually dense as well. And it's interesting that Psalm 83 verse 6 talks about how the Edomites, which are the descendants of Esau, and the Ishmaelites, consort together against Israel in the future down the road. We're not there yet, but, this is just the making of the future story against, the house of Jacob. Okay, well, the story is going to come to an end here. Jacob leaves Beersheba. He goes to Haran. He comes to this place to stay the night because the sun had set. Taking one of the stones of the place, he put it under his head and he lay down to take a nap, to take a sleep for the night. And he dreamed, and behold, there was a ladder set up on earth, and the top of it reached to heaven. And behold, the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. And behold, the Lord stood above it and said, I am the Lord, the God of Abraham, your father, the God of Isaac. The land on which you lie, I will give to you and your offspring. Your offspring shall be like the dust of the earth, and you shall spread abroad to the west and to the east and to the north and to the south. And in you, all your offspring, shall all the families of the earth be blessed. Behold, I am with you, and I will keep you wherever you go, and will bring you back to this land, for I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you. Then Jacob awoke from his sleep, and he said, surely the Lord is in this place, and I didn't know it. And he was afraid, and he said, how awesome is this place? This is none other than the house of God. It's the gate of heaven. So early in the morning, Jacob took the stone that he had put under his head, and he set it up on a pillar, and he poured oil on the top of it, and he called the name of that place Bethel, because the name of the city was Luz at first. Jacob made a vow, and he said, if God will be with me, and will keep me in this way that I go, and will give me bread to eat and clothing to wear, so that I come again to my father's house in peace, then the Lord shall be my God. And this stone, which I've set up for a pillar, shall be God's house. And all of that you give me, I'll give a full tenth to you. Okay, so how does the scene conclude? Well, first of all, we come into this scene wondering to ourselves, or saying to ourselves, this is a categorical mess. This is like a hurricane of the biggest magnitude that has just wrecked the family. The family could not be more splintered. Jacob's on the run. Esau hates, them. Rebekah and Isaac are at odds with one another. The big question is, can God bless this thing? Will God bless this thing? And that should be our question coming into this. And when we, come to it, that's certainly Jacob's question. I don't know that Jacob has any real hope anymore that God is going to bless this mess, if you know what I mean. He's heading to Haran to get a wife, but I think Jacob's thinking to himself, this turned into an absolute disaster. And then Jacob has this dream, which answers that question. And the answer is very exciting. Yes. Yes is the answer. God's promise to Abraham is secure and it's moving forward. Despite the human messes, despite the family drama, despite, the failures of Isaac, Rebekah, Esau, and Jacob, this is great news because the Bible, God, cuts through the inflation of human nonsense and makes it clear to us that God is in this thing, and there's nothing that can derail his plan to bring his blessing to the whole earth, to all of the nations and all of the families of the earth, to bring his blessing, because he promised something to Abraham. And we can see that, Isaac's family dysfunction and Jacob's family dysfunction is not going to derail God's plan. It's the Bible itself that confesses very clearly that it is written by men. But I will tell you this, only God can get people to be so honest about themselves and their failures the way the Bible does. The whole Bible is a confession of failure by all of the people who write it. And that alone smells like truth. When people are open and honest about their own failures and they give credit to someone else for their success, like God, I'm telling you, that's what makes the Bible absolutely real and absolutely truthful in a world full of nonsense and an inflation of human nonsense. This makes it real. And the dream that Jacob has, the dream implies the afterlife, because in this dream, it's very clear that there's a dimension that we cannot see, that there is something behind the scenes that we don't have access to see. We can only see the things of earth. We're going to have to be taught, or we're going to have to hear about, the reality of this life in the afterlife. And it's very clear here that what Jacob sees is that there is going to be no building. There is no building and no stairway to heaven that is built by man. Because like Kenny Chesney tells us, the keys to heaven can't be bought. I think Peter tells us that too. But anyhow, think about that Tower of Babel back in Genesis chapter 11. Think about the ziggurats and the pyramids of the ancient Near East. All of those were efforts to build our own stairway to heaven, to build our own access to heaven. Ain't gonna happen. But the cool thing is that God will provide a stairway to heaven, and that there is a heaven. There is a reality that is more than what we can see. And that is such good news. That should lift our spirits. We should be just as pumped up as Jacob is. And he says, how awesome is this place? This is terrific. And it is terrific for our souls to think about that stairway to heaven and to think more about how God will provide that stairway to those with faith. He doesn't provide the stairway to heaven to those who are perfect and those who are clever. And that has become clear to Jacob as well. What we can all see and what we can all hear is that the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob has made promises that we can rely on. And that's what we are meant to do. We are meant to come and to see and to hear, to put it all together. Isaac and Esau, could only see stuff, and they didn't combine hearing with it. And it left them spiritually dense. We need to see things, and we need to see a reality that we can't always see, and hear the reality that God is giving us in this dream. There is definitely a dimension that we can trust and rely on, where the angels are going up and down, and the stairway to heaven is going to be given to us by God when we put our faith and trust in him. Well, we can also see that God's promise that he gives to Jacob is very interesting, because he does not promise Jacob a smooth life that's problem-free, not at all. But he does promise Jacob that he will be with him to the end. Jacob's journey truly is going to be rough, and we're going to cover that next week, so check back in. Jacob's journey is going to be rough, but God is going to be with him all the way. That's the promise that he makes, and he's actually going to God says, I will bring you back to this place. And Jacob's 22-year-long journey that he's going to be on, going to Haran, to his uncle Laban's place, is going to actually galvanize his faith in God, and he will die a much better man. That's the goal, is that we wouldn't be perfect or clever, but we would keep moving forward in our faith with God, and that we would die much better men. Rise to the occasion. Anyhow, God's house, is talked a lot about here. And it's very interesting that God's house is a rock in the middle of nowhere. and Jacob says, he's like, holy cow. Well, I'll just take this rock and put it here. And because God's house is here, even though he just put a rock in the middle of nowhere outside of a city called, Luz. And the author tells us that because Luz was a real city, and Jacob is outside of that city. He is not welcome in this city. And so outside in the middle of nowhere, Jacob says this will be a rock that is the house of God. And that is picture perfect, because it is God who makes his house out of nothing. He makes his house out of nothings like Abraham, nothings like Isaac, nothings like Jacob, nothings like me and you. And he does not need our clever schemes at all. So Jacob's deal that he makes with God, very interesting for us to see too. It's okay to make deals with God, but Jacob's deal with God is, hey, give me bread to eat and clothing to wear, and get me back to my father's house in peace, and I am all in. I am all in. So I think that too gives us some perspective and some depth, to our own wishes and wants from God. Even the Lord's Prayer focuses on daily bread, where, Jacob says, just, daily bread. Keep me focused on daily bread. Keep me focused on your will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Jacob's deal is only focused on what exactly God promises us, and we would do well to imitate that. At the end of the day, this whole story is a breath of fresh air, because it actually reeks of human dysfunction, which all of us can relate to human dysfunction. Every single family has dysfunctional moments and stress points. And the bigger point that is being made is that the obstacle of God's people is not on the outside with outsiders. God's Bible has no time for us blaming everything on the world around us. It's a Cain kills Abel kind of world, and Cain kills Abel for no good reason. But what God promises is that he will be with us, and that he will get us to the end of our life. And he will be with us every step of the way. And that's his promise to us to the very end. And he will get us up that ladder. He will enable us. He will be our strength and take us exactly where we want to be. And that is home with God. Jesus talks the same exact way, that his death and his resurrection, that is the ladder. That is the entryway. By putting our faith in his death and in his resurrection, God tells us, despite your imperfections, despite your silliness, despite your family feuds, despite everything that's going wrong in this world, Put your trust in the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. Put your trust in the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, because that's what Jesus was pointing us to. God relates to us as the most ordinary people on this planet, and he assures us that he is with us in detail of every step of every way. And that ought to make everything better that we experience, even the bad stuff. All right, well, that's where we're going to end. We'll catch you next time.